The poker chips clattered across the wooden table like scattered bones as Mordecai Ravencrest's trembling hands pushed his daughter's photograph into the center. "She's worth more than all my debts combined," he whispered, bourbon thick on his breath. Kestrel Ironwolf's steel-gray eyes never left the desperate father's face as he scooped up the daguerreotype. The most feared bounty hunter in 3 territories had seen men sell their souls before, but never so literally. "Your daughter for your gambling debts," he said, voice cutting through the saloon's tobacco haze. "That's what you're proposing?" Outside, thunder rolled across the Nebraska plains like cannon fire. Inside Murphy's den, the usual crowd of drifters and cattlemen had fallen silent, sensing the weight of what was unfolding at the corner table. "Serafina don't know about my difficulties," Mordecai stammered. "She's been teaching at the schoolhouse, thinking I've been working the claim successfully. But the mine's been dry for months, and Blackjack Morrison's boys will string me up come dawn if I don't settle." Kestrel studied the photograph. Even in the faded sepia tones, the girl's defiant beauty blazed through wild auburn curls framing intelligent green eyes that seemed to challenge the very camera capturing her image. This was no simpering flower waiting to be plucked. This was fire contained in human form. "She won't come willing," Kestrel observed. "She will if she thinks." "She's saving my life," Mordecai's voice cracked. Tell her you need a wife to settle down, that you'll pay handsomely for the privilege. She's got too much heart to let her old man hang." The bounty hunter had tracked killers across frozen mountains and through desert storms. He'd faced down entire gangs without flinching. But something about this arrangement sat wrong in his gut like bad whiskey. Still, he'd been living rough for too long, moving from one violent job to the next. The idea of having someone to call his own stirred feelings he'd buried years ago. 5,000 clears your debt," Kestrel said finally. "But understand this, Ravencrest, once I claim her, she's mine. No take-backs when you sober up and regret this bargain." Mordecai nodded frantically. "Just be good to her. She deserves better than what I'm giving her." As if summoned by her father's words, the saloon doors burst open. Serafina Ravencrest stood silhouetted against the storm, her traveling dress plastered to her curves by rain, hair whipping around her face like liquid flame. She'd obviously ridden hard through the tempest. "Papa, they told me you were here." Her voice carried the authority of a woman accustomed to commanding respect despite her youth. "The bank manager came by the school," he said. Her words died as she took in the scene, her father's guilty expression, the money on the table, and the dangerous stranger watching her with predatory intensity. Kestrel rose slowly, his imposing frame unfolding like a spring-loaded trap. 6'4" of hard muscle and harder reputation, he wore his guns low and his scars like badges of honor. "Miss Ravencrest, I presume." Something in his tone made her spine stiffen. "Who are you?" "Your husband-to-be, if you value your father's life." The words hit the room like a lightning strike. Seraphine's gaze snapped between Kestrel and her father, reading the truth in Mordecai's ashamed face. "Papa, what have you done?" "He owes money he can't pay," Kestrel said before the older man could speak. "I'm offering a solution that benefits everyone. You come with me willingly, become my wife, and your father keeps breathing. Refuse, and I collect my bounty from Morrison in more traditional ways." Seraphine's green eyes blazed with fury so pure it could have melted steel. In that moment, Kestrel knew he just made the most dangerous bargain of his violent life. This woman wouldn't just be conquered, she'd fight him every step of the way, and God help him. He found himself looking forward to it. "You want me to marry a stranger to pay for your gambling debts?" Seraphine's voice could have frozen the Mississippi in July. She advanced on her father like an avenging angel, rain dripping from her sodden dress onto the saloon sawdust floor. Kestrel watched the confrontation with growing fascination. Most women would have dissolved into tears or vapors by now. This one blazed brighter with each revelation, like a flame fed by fury. "Sarah, sweetheart, please," Mordecai began. "Don't." She held up a hand that trembled with rage, not fear. "Don't you dare sweetheart me when you've just bartered me away like livestock." Her emerald gaze shifted to Kestrel. "And you? What kind of man accepts such an arrangement? The kind who's practical about getting what he wants." Kestrel's voice remained steady despite the storm raging in his chest. Up close, she was even more magnificent, all-righteous fury and untamed beauty. "I need a wife. You need your father alive. Seems like destiny." "Destiny?" She laughed, but the sound held no humor. "This is madness." "Maybe, but it's the only madness available." He stepped closer, and she held her ground despite his intimidating presence. "Brave little wildcat. I'm not giving you a choice in the matter, Miss Ravencrest, only in how we handle it. You can come willing, or I can throw you over my shoulder and carry you out. Either way, you're leaving with me tonight." "Like hell I am." The speed of her movement caught everyone off guard. In one fluid motion, she snatched a whiskey bottle from a nearby table and swung it at Kestrel's head. He ducked, but not quite fast enough. The glass caught his temple, sending liquor and blood streaming down his face. The saloon erupted in chaos. Men dove for cover as Seraphina grabbed another bottle, her makeshift weapon glinting in the lamplight. "Stay back," she warned, but Kestrel was already moving. His hand shot out, catching her wrist in an iron grip before she could swing again. With practiced ease, he disarmed her and spun her around, pinning her back against his chest with one arm while the other pressed a cloth to his bleeding head. "Spirited," he murmured against her ear, his breath hot on her neck. "I like that in a woman." "Release me, you savage, or you'll what?" His arm tightened fractionally. Not enough to hurt, but enough to demonstrate his control. "Fight me? You just tried that. Scream? Go ahead, half the men in here owe me favors, and the other half are too scared to interfere." She tested his grip and found it unbreakable. The reality of her situation began to sink in like ice water through her veins. "Please," she whispered, and the word cost her everything. Something in that broken plea made Kestrel's chest constrict. He loosened his hold slightly. "I'm not a monster, Seraphina. I won't hurt you unnecessarily. But I meant what I said. You're coming with me." "Why?" She turned in his arms to face him, tears finally threatening to spill. "Why me? You could have any saloon girl, any willing woman. Why force someone who despises you?" For a moment, his mask slipped. She saw something raw and lonely in his gray eyes before he shuddered it away. "Because willing women don't stay. They take what they need and move on. But a wife—" He touched her cheek with surprising gentleness. "A wife is bound to you, for better or worse. That's what marriage vows are," she said quietly. "Not ownership. Papers. We'll see." He released her and stepped back, pulling a leather pouch from his coat. 5,000 as agreed, he told Mordecai, tossing the money on the table. "The Reverend's waiting at my ranch. We'll be married before midnight." Seraphina looked at her father one last time. Mordecai couldn't meet her eyes. "Then God help us both," she said, and walked toward the door without looking back. The storm outside seemed gentle compared to the tempest she carried in her heart. The Iron Wolf Ranch sprawled across the valley like a sleeping giant, its main house a monument to prosperity built from blood and bullets. As Kestrel's wagon rattled up the winding drive, Seraphina felt the weight of her new reality settling around her like chains. "Quite a place," she said, determined not to show intimidation. "Home," he replied simply. "Yours now, too." "Reverend." Whitmore waited on the porch, Bible clutched in arthritic hands. The old man's eyes were kind but troubled as he performed the hastiest ceremony of his 50-year career. Seraphina spoke her vows like a woman facing a firing squad, clearly, defiantly, but with the knowledge that each word sealed her fate. When Kestrel kissed her to seal their union, she tasted bourbon and danger on his lips. His hands were surprisingly gentle as they framed her face, but she felt the leashed power in him like a wild animal held on a fraying rope. "Show me to my room," she said when the Reverend departed, leaving them alone in the cavernous parlor. Kestrel's smile was Wolf-sharp. "Our room, wife. We're married now. In name only." She lifted her chin defiantly. "I may be bound to you legally, but that doesn't give you rights to my body, doesn't it?" He moved closer, backing her against the carved mantelpiece. "Most wives share their husband's bed. Most wives choose their husbands." Her heart hammered against her ribs as he bracketed her with his arms, but she held his gaze steadily. "I will not be taken by force." For a long moment, they stared at each other, predator and prey locked in a battle of wills. Then, unexpectedly, Kestrel laughed and stepped back. "No," he agreed, "you won't be taken by force. But you will be taken, Seraphina, when you're ready to admit you want me as much as I want you. That will never happen." "We'll see." He gestured toward the grand staircase. "Your room is the blue one at the end of the hall. Mine's across from it. The door locks from the inside, if that makes you feel safer." His unexpected consideration threw her off balance. She'd prepared for brutality, not ... whatever this was. "Thank you," she said stiffly. "Don't thank me yet. You'll earn your place here, same as anyone else. Tomorrow you start learning what it means to be Mrs. Ironwolf." That night, Seraphina lay awake in the elegant bedroom, listening to the sounds of the house settling around her. Somewhere across the hall, her husband moved about his room, her captor, her protector, her fate wrapped up in one impossibly complicated man. She'd expected him to demand his husbandly rights, expected violence or at least coercion. Instead, he'd given her sanctuary and asked for nothing in return. It was almost worse than brutality. At least brutality was honest. Near dawn, she heard his door open and close, followed by the sound of boots on stairs. From her window, she watched him stride toward the stables, magnificent even in the gray pre-dawn light. He moved like a man comfortable with violence, but the way he gentled his black stallion spoke of deeper capacities. "What are you, Kestrel? Ironwolf?" She whispered to the glass dot in the kitchen. She found breakfast waiting and a note in bold handwriting. "Explore the ranch. Learn the layout. You're the mistress here, now act like it. Kay the housekeeper, a weathered woman named Dove." Singing, emerged from the pantry. "Morning, Mrs. Ironwolf. The boss said you'd be wanting to see the place." "I suppose I would." Seraphina folded the note carefully. "Tell me," Dove singing, "what kind of man is my husband?" The older woman's lined face creased in what might have been a smile. "The kind who builds an empire from nothing and then wonders why it feels empty. The kind who needs something worth protecting more than he needs protection itself. And he thinks that something is me? I think, child, that you're going to surprise each other." Outside, Kestrel's voice carried across the yard as he directed his men, strong, commanding, absolute in his authority. Seraphina shivered, though the morning was warm. The real battle was just beginning. 3 weeks into her marriage, Seraphina had mapped every inch of the Ironwolf ranch and tested every boundary of her husband's patience. She transformed the stuffy parlor into a makeshift schoolroom, teaching the ranch hand's children to read despite Kestrel's raised eyebrows. She reorganized the kitchen to Dove singing's initial horror and eventual delight. She even convinced the surly foreman, Flynn Hawthorne, to let her help with the horses. What she hadn't done was warm to her husband's bed, despite his increasingly heated looks across the dinner table each night. "You're pushing him." dove singing warned as they prepared the evening meal. He's not a patient man by nature. Then he shouldn't have forced me into marriage. Serafina kneaded bread dough with unnecessary violence. I won't be conquered simply because he wills it. Child, sometimes surrender ain't about losing. Sometimes it's about winning something bigger than pride. Before Serafina could respond, the kitchen door slammed open. Kestrel filled the doorframe, mud-splattered and dangerous. His gray eyes found her immediately, blazing with something that made her pulse skip. "We need to talk," he said. "Now." She followed him to his study, acutely aware of the coiled tension in his movements. He poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and drank it down before turning to face her. "Blackjack Morrison escaped federal custody yesterday," he said without preamble. "Word is he's coming here with a dozen men to collect what he's owed with interest." Seraphine's blood chilled. "My father's debt is paid." "Not in Morrison's mind. He figures your father cheated him out of sport by dying too easily. Thinks taking my wife will send the right message about crossing him. My father's dead?" The words came out as a whisper. Kestrel's expression softened fractionally. "Found him this morning, swinging from a tree outside town. Morrison's calling." Card. The room spun around her. Whatever anger she'd harbored toward her father evaporated in the face of this stark reality. He killed him anyway? Men like Morrison don't forgive debts, Serafina. They collect them in blood. Kestrel moved to her side as her knees threatened to buckle. "I'm sorry." She let him guide her to a chair, too shocked for tears. "What does this mean for us?" "It means the game's changed. Morrison won't stop until he has you or until someone stops him permanently." His hand settled on her shoulder, warm and surprisingly comforting. "I need to know you'll follow my orders when the time comes. No arguments, no rebellion. Your life depends on it." The old Serafina would have bristled at his commanding tone. But grief and fear had stripped away her defenses, leaving something raw underneath. "You could send me away. Hide me somewhere safe." "No." The word came out harsher than he'd intended. "You're my wife. My responsibility. My—" He stopped himself before saying something they weren't ready to hear. "You're what?" she asked quietly. He knelt beside her chair, bringing their eyes level. "My everything," he said finally. "Whether you want to be or not." The admission hung between them. Like a bridge neither dared cross. Serafina saw the truth in his storm-gray eyes. This powerful, dangerous man who could have had anything he wanted had chosen her. Not just claimed her, but chosen her. "Kestrel," she began, but he rose abruptly. "Morrison will be here within the week. I'm sending you to the stronghold tomorrow, a cabin in the mountains where you'll be safe." "Alone?" "With 2 of my best men." His jaw clenched. "I'll come for you when it's over." "And if you don't come back?" The question seemed to surprise him. He studied her face as if memorizing it. "Then you'll be free to live as you choose. There's money hidden in the cabin, enough to start over anywhere you want." She stood and moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. "I don't want to be free of you," she whispered. "Not anymore." The confession hung between them, fragile and dangerous as spun glass. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, and somewhere in the darkness, death rode toward them with Morrison's face. "I'm not hiding in some mountain cave while you face Morrison alone." Serafina blocked the doorway to their shared kitchen, green eyes blazing with determination that had become familiar and devastating to Kestrel's carefully constructed defenses. "You don't have a choice in this." He moved to step around her, but she shifted to block him again. The woman was magnificent in her defiance, auburn hair catching the morning light like fire. "I have every choice. I'm your wife, not your property to be stored away for safekeeping. You're my wife, which means you're exactly that, mine to protect." His voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to obedience, but Serafina had never been one to bow to authority. Then protect me by your side, not hidden away like some shameful secret. Before he could respond, Flint Hawthorne burst through the kitchen door, his weathered face grim. "Boss, riders coming up the valley." 24 at least, flying Morrison's colors. Kestrel's blood chilled. "They're early. And mad as wet hornets. They got themselves a cannon, too." The distant boom of artillery punctuated his words, followed by the crash of splintering wood from the barn. Seraphine's face went pale, but her jaw remained set. "Looks like the choice is made for us," she said quietly. Kestrel grabbed her shoulders, his grip desperate. "Promise me something. Whatever happens, you stay alive. Run if you have to, hide if you can, but live. Promise me." The raw emotion in his voice cracked something inside her chest. "Only if you promise the same." He kissed her then, hard and hungry and full of everything they'd been dancing around for weeks. She melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, tasting desperation and desire on his lips. "I love you," she whispered against his mouth, words torn from her heart. "I fought it, but I love you, Kestrel Ironwolf." His eyes blazed brighter than the sun. "And I love you, Serafina Ironwolf, more than my own life." Another cannonball shook the house, reminding them of the approaching storm. Kestrel armed himself with practiced efficiency, 2 Colts on his hips, a rifle in his hands, knives tucked into his boots. He handed Serafina a small derringer. "You know how to use this?" "I'm a schoolteacher from Nebraska. Of course I know how to shoot." Despite everything, he smiled. "My dangerous little wife." The battle erupted with the fury of a prairie thunderstorm. Morrison's men came hard and fast, guns blazing as they poured across the ranch grounds. But Kestrel had chosen his defensive positions well, and his men fought with the loyalty earned through years of fair treatment and shared danger. Serafina proved herself no delicate flower. When 3 of Morrison's thugs broke through the kitchen window, she dropped 2 with precise shots before Kestrel could reach her. The third grabbed her from behind, pressing a knife to her throat. "Drop your guns, Ironwolf, or your pretty wife bleeds out." Kestrel's world narrowed to the sight of steel against Seraphine's pale throat. His hands trembled as he slowly lowered his weapons. "That's better," the man snarled. "Morrison's gonna enjoy breaking this one." But he'd underestimated his captive. Serafina drove her elbow into his ribs, twisted free, and put her final bullet through his heart before he could recover. "Behind you!" she screamed. Kestrel spun to find Morrison himself in the doorway, gun trained on Seraphine's back. Time slowed as the outlaw's finger tightened on the trigger. Kestrel dove forward, his own weapon coming up even as Morrison's gun bloomed flame. The shots were simultaneous. Morrison crumpled to the floor, Kestrel's bullet through his brain. But the outlaw's shot had found its mark too. Kestrel clutched his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. Kestrel, Serafina, caught him as he staggered. "Is it over?" He gasped. Outside, the gunfire was dying away. Flint's voice carried across the yard, rallying the survivors. "We got him, boss. Morrison's men are running." Serafina pressed her hands to his wound, her tears falling freely now. "Yes, my love, it's over." Meridian's gnarled hands worked with surprising gentleness as he extracted the bullet from Kestrel's shoulder. Serafina held her husband's good hand while he gritted his teeth against the pain, refusing the laudanum that would dull his senses when danger might still lurk. "Stubborn fool," the old physician muttered, dropping the bloody lid into a tin basin. "Could have nicked the artery. You're lucky to be breathing." "Lucky to have something worth bleeding for," Kestrel replied, his storm-gray eyes never leaving. Seraphine's face? She'd barely left his side in the 3 days since the battle, tending his wound with fierce devotion. The woman who'd fought their marriage tooth and nail had become his most dedicated guardian, and the transformation left him speechless with wonder. "The fever's breaking," she announced as she laid a cool cloth across his forehead. "Doc says, you'll mend clean if you don't do anything foolish." Define foolish. His voice was rough but stronger than it had been. "Anything that involves leaving this bed before I say so." Despite his pain, Kestrel smiled. "Yes, ma'am, Mrs. Ironwolf." The title no longer sat bitter on her tongue. Somewhere between Morrison's attack and Kestrel's brush with death, she'd stopped fighting what she'd become and started embracing it. She was his wife in truth now, not just in law. "The ranch hands have been asking after you," she said, settling into the chair beside his bed. "Flint's got everything under control, but they're worried about their boss. Good men. I chose well when I hired them." "You choose well in general," she said softly, "even when your methods are questionable." He studied her face, searching for any trace of the resentment that had marked their early days. Finding none, he dared to voice the question that had haunted him. "Do you regret it? The marriage, I mean?" Serafina was quiet for so long, he thought. She wouldn't answer. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I regret how it began. I regret that my father died thinking I hated him for it." "But regret you?" She leaned forward, pressing her lips to his palm. "Never. Even though I forced you? Did you?" She tilted her head, considering. "Or did you simply present me with the only choice I could live with? I could never have let Papa die, and we both knew it. You could have run once you were here. Could have taken that money I mentioned and disappeared. Where would I go?" she asked. "What life could compare to this?" "To you?" The admission hung between them like a bridge finally completed. Kestrel pulled her closer with his good arm, burying his face in her auburn hair. "I dreamed of this," he confessed. "Having someone who belonged here, who belonged to me. And I dreamed of someone who would fight for me the way you did." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "Papa never fought for anything in his life, just let it all slip away. But you carved a place in this world with your bare hands and then shared it with me. Our place," he corrected. "Our world." She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "When you're healed," she murmured against his lips, "we're going to have a proper wedding night." His laugh was rough with desire. "Is that a threat or a promise, Mrs. Ironwolf?" "Both." A soft knock interrupted them. Dove singing peered around the door, her weathered face creasing into a smile at the sight of their obvious contentment. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's a visitor downstairs. Says he's got business with the Ironwolves." Serafina frowned. "What kind of business?" "The federal marshal kind. Says he's got questions about Morrison's operation and an offer that might interest you both." Kestrel tried to sit up, wincing as the motion pulled at his stitches. "Tell him I'll be down." "You'll be staying right here," Serafina said firmly. "I'll handle the marshal." "Together," Kestrel said. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." She squeezed his hand. "Together." Marshal Calhoun removed his hat as Serafina entered the parlor, Kestrel leaning heavily on her arm despite his protests. The federal lawman was younger than expected, with intelligent eyes and the bearing of a man who'd seen too much of humanity's darker nature. "Mrs. Ironwolf, Mr. Ironwolf." He nodded respectfully. "I apologize for the timing, but this couldn't wait." "Speak your piece," Kestrel said, settling into his chair with barely concealed discomfort. "Morrison's dead, his gang scattered to the winds." "That's the good news." The marshal's expression grew serious. "The bad news is we found evidence of a broader conspiracy. Morrison was working with corrupt officials to control territory from here to California. With him gone, there's a power vacuum that needs filling." Serafina felt Kestrel tense beside her. "What kind of filling?" The kind that requires someone with your husband's reputation and your organizational skills. Calhoun smiled slightly. The territorial governor is prepared to offer you both federal commissions. Mr. Ironwolf would become the regional peace officer with authority over a territory spanning 3 counties. Mrs. Ironwolf would oversee the establishment of proper schools and civic institutions. The offer hung in the air like morning mist, beautiful but fragile. Serafina looked at her husband, seeing the longing in his eyes. A chance to build something lasting, to channel his skills toward creation rather than destruction. There'd be a town, Calhoun continued, right here, centered on your ranch. Families would come, businesses would follow. You'd be founding something that could last generations. What's the catch? Kestrel asked because he'd learned there was always a catch. The work's dangerous. The territory's still wild, and there are interests that won't appreciate federal oversight. You'd be targets, both of you, for as long as you held the positions. Serafina felt a chill of Memory Morrison's knife at her throat, the sound of gunfire, the smell of blood and smoke. Then she looked at the ranch stretching beyond the windows, imagining it filled with the laughter of children, the bustle of honest commerce, the steady growth of civilization. We'll need time to consider, Kestrel began. We accept, Serafina interrupted. Both men stared at her. Kestrel's eyes held a mixture of pride and concern. Sarah, the danger, will be the same whether we're officials or just targets. She stood, moving to the window that overlooked their domain. My father spent his life running from responsibility, gambling away everything that mattered. I won't make that mistake. And if we die trying? She turned back to him, her green eyes blazing with the same fire that had first captured his attention. In that smoky saloon. Then we die trying to build something worth dying for. Marshal Calhoun cleared his throat. There's one more thing. The territorial capital is considering statehood. If that happens, and if you've successfully established your region, there'd likely be a governorship in your future, Mr. Ironwolf. Kestrel laughed, the sound rich with amazement. From bounty hunter to governor, what do you think of that, wife? Ready to be first lady of a state? Ready to be queen of whatever kingdom we build together, she replied without hesitation. 1 year later, the town of Ironhold boasted a population of 300 and growing. The schoolhouse Serafina had designed stood at the town's heart, with the sheriff's office and courthouse flanking it like guardians. Children who'd never imagined learning to read now recited Shakespeare, while their parents built lives free from the fear that had once dominated the territory. On their first wedding anniversary, Kestrel found Serafina on the porch of their expanded home, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Any regrets? He asked, settling beside her. She leaned into his warmth, her hand resting over her slightly rounded belly where their first child grew. Only that it took a devil's bargain to bring us together. Sometimes, he said, kissing the top of her head. The devil does God's work without meaning to. In the distance, church bells rang across their thriving kingdom, calling all souls home to the empire built on love's foundation.